What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Good morning. This is Don from Defion Productions, the hardest working nobody in Bitcoin. Had a little bit of technical difficulties getting started with the last video, but we're here back live. Audio is good. It is October 10th, 2024. Really quick, I just want to give a shout out to the state of Florida, all the family and friends that I got down there. My parents are actually down there, and I was able to hear from them this morning. They told me it took a little bit of damage, but everybody's okay, which is the main thing. Heard from some other people that I have in different areas of the state. Just waiting to hear from one friend who is actually in the Sarasota area, kind of where the eye hit. So awaiting his all good from him. And I heard back from some other people as well that are in the Orlando area saying it was very scary, but everybody's safe and sound. Defion Productions is sending our thoughts, prayers, and love out to everybody across the state, hoping that the damage can be repaired and it can quickly go back to normal after these two horrific storms in such a short period of time wreaked havoc through that state. Crazy, the videos that I saw overnight on what was going on down there, and knowing that you got people down there and possibly in the middle of that is kind of nerve-wracking. So wanted to start the podcast off talking about that and giving our thoughts to everybody that's down there. Onto the Bitcoin charts. Bitcoin has made some moves in the recent week. We were close to 64,000 a couple of days ago, about a week ago. Typically this time of year, we have a lot of choppiness, but it looked like it was about to make that move. And it did, but to the other direction. We are sitting at about 60,468 right now. Fear and greed is at about 37. Traditionally, the all-time high movements are made November, December. If you look back at 2012, 2016, and 2020, although this cycle has been different because we had the ETFs, we saw that way back in March. So we've already hit the all-time high this cycle. So we're kind of in a little bit of uncharted territory. So it'll be interesting to see if we are going to make that move back like we normally do November, December towards an all-time high. A lot of the people that are in the business of making predictions online are saying that they think we'll hit 100K before the end of the year. I'm not sure. Of course, it's possible. It's got a ways to go. It's like almost an 80% move from here would be to 100K. Doing that in 2 months and some change would be a lot, but definitely not within the realm of possibility. So we'll keep an eye on it, see how it plays itself out. The big thing that we're going to talk about today that happened a couple of days ago that seems to have a lot of people talking on Bitcoin X would be the documentary that was dropped on HBO. I believe it was October 6th, where allegedly they have found who Satoshi is. So we'll start there. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about their uncovering, we'll put in air quotes, of who they believe Satoshi to be, what that means for Bitcoin, what that means for the person that they're alleging to be Satoshi. I'm going to start with a Twitter post by the Predator, who I think, in my opinion, from all the takes that I've read regarding this documentary, had probably one of the best. A little bit lengthy, but I'm going to read it because I think it's good to share. Just finished watching HBO's Satoshi documentary. This was one of the least compelling Satoshi Nakamoto identities I've ever seen. Early on in the documentary, around 11 minutes in, the narrator suggests the identity of Satoshi should not be known because it could endanger his safety. Then, ironically, he proceeds to recklessly accuse Peter Todd of being Satoshi Nakamoto without actually having proof. They interviewed Peter Todd, and Peter was trolling Cullen the whole time. At one point, Peter says, "I suspect a lot of them Bitcoiners will be very happy if you go this route," referring to Cullen accusing Peter of being Satoshi, because it's going to be yet another example of journalists really missing the point in a way that's very funny. Peter was right. This documentary is garbage and shameful. The strongest piece of evidence presented was a reply Peter Todd made to Satoshi, and the image is attached to this tweet, which the documentary framed Peter Todd as accidentally continuing Satoshi's thoughts while logged into an alt account. Believe it or not, this was their most compelling argument, and it's not compelling at all. It does not look to me like Peter is continuing Satoshi's thoughts. It just looks like he is correcting Satoshi, as Peter has done many times. The second best piece of evidence was a message from a chat log where Peter once stated that uniquely he's an uniquely qualified expert in sacrificing coins because he did exactly one's sacrifice before himself. Again, this is not proof of anything, just one more weak innuendo and circumstance. After that, that's when the evidence really starts falling apart in quality. And that's saying something because the earlier evidence wasn't good at all. Cullen tries to use the John Dillon emails as proof of something, but I'm really not sure any of it was related. He goes into some insane conspiracy theory where he believes Peter Todd invented the John Dillon identity so he could cover up the tracks of his old forum post and make it easier for him to advocate for RBF. The level of reaching here rivals QAnon stuff, which is pretty ironic if you know what Cullen's previous documentary was about. This documentary is emblematic of why all of the Satoshi Nakamoto theories are bunk. They all hinge on the belief that only a very small amount of people in the world are capable of building Bitcoin. So the theorists just pick a notable person for their achievements and work backwards retrospectively to find a bunch of coincidences in their lifestyle, background to support their confirmation bias. It's a broken methodology which results in stalking and unethical doxing. In reality, the potential amount of people with the profile and background capable of creating Bitcoin in 2008 was in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. The likelihood that Satoshi was any of these semi-public figures that regularly gets accused of being Satoshi is pretty slim. That's why if you don't have concrete proof, you should probably keep your Satoshi Nakamoto identity theories to yourself. All it does is put a $60 billion bounty on the back of what is most likely the wrong person. When I read this, I thought it was spot on, because I think the longer we go in this whole Bitcoin experiment, the more dangerous it becomes for the people that we throw the arrows at believing or wanting to believe or trying to get people to believe are Satoshi. We've seen this throughout Bitcoin's existence. Those of you that have been around long enough, I don't know if people remember if they were here, but in the 2017 bull run, we had a guy whose name was actually Satoshi Nakamoto living in, I believe it was San Francisco or somewhere in California as an attorney. And they had people from the media show up at his doorstep and news cameras and everybody saying, you're the inventor of Bitcoin. You must be the Satoshi that created Bitcoin. And this guy's life, I mean, if you go online and you put Satoshi into GIFs and memes, this guy's face pops up. He's an older Asian gentleman with glasses, and his life was turned upside down, and it can be very dangerous for people, especially now as Bitcoin sits at 60,000 plus. Those million coins are worth $60 billion. And as this price goes up, those million Genesis block coins are just going to continue to go up in value, and it's going to be even higher stakes for whoever gets tossed around as potentially being Satoshi, for people to do some unsavory things to that individual, believing that they are in fact Satoshi, to try to get them to give up access to those coins. It's a dangerous game that we play. And honestly, in my personal opinion, and I know that this opinion is probably felt by many other Bitcoiners as well, it doesn't matter who Satoshi is, honestly. As long as those coins do not move, it's irrelevant who Satoshi is. Because for as long as Bitcoin has been in existence, for the 15 years that we've been in this Bitcoin experience, none of those coins have ever moved. So one of two things are true. Number one, whoever Satoshi was or is dead. That person passed. They're no longer on this planet able to move those coins. Or the person that's alive that was Satoshi lost the private keys to those coins and can't move them because of that. Because I think at this point, with the valuation of what those coins are worth, I just think it's so hard for any human being to not be tempted to move those coins for any reason. I mean, even if they don't have ill intent, even for what's the word? Philanthropy reasons for you know, putting, a couple thousand coins to a good cause, or, helping people out in third world countries. Whoever the individual or individuals are that created Bitcoin had good intentions, and I could believe would want to do some good with those coins' economic value potentially. So I think one of two things is true. Number one, the creator or creators are dead. Number two, the creator or creators do not have access to the private keys of those coins, which brings us to a side point, which is protect your seed phrases and protect your keys to your coins. Because if you lose those, you cannot access your coins. It's funny, me and Rich were just having a conversation prior to coming on the podcast about somebody that he was talking to that's in estate planning, right?
Estate planning.
Yeah. You can talk a little bit about that, about what she was kind of sharing with you.
Let me switch my camera. So yeah, like it's there was a person appearing on a different podcast that we were recording, and they're like do elder care and estate planning and wills and all that stuff. And one of the things they have to do now is they ask people if they have anything like Bitcoin, because if you're creating a will, you want to make sure that you've planned for if something happens to you, you could die in a car accident.
Yeah.
Like, does that person know how to access the key? Like, and that's one of those things that it's a new world. And so I was interesting that, and I was telling her about this podcast. She's, I have to watch, because it's a different, like you have to think about those things. You have to have that planning, which is weird because I'm looking forward to watching the documentary. I just haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it yet, because I want to see this take on. It reminds me of the Geraldo thing when he was going to open up the vault to find all of
Al Capone's vault, right?
Al Capone's vault, and it was empty. And I feel like that was like they set out to do this documentary, and they needed to have like this big ending instead of just focusing on what it is.
Yeah, I think there's too much energy being put into trying to find out who Satoshi is, who this person is that would create this coin, and less energy being put into what it is, why it's important, and what it's doing to finance. I mean, if these journalists in these media outlets spent a little bit of the time that they're spending trying to figure out who this person is into why Bitcoin and why it exists and what it exists for, or even deeper, the actual system that we engage in, why it's so corrupt and why Bitcoin is needed to fix this system, then maybe something good could actually come out of all this. But I just think, making these accusations and making these documentaries are way more dangerous than beneficial. Sure, some people are going to like to spend an hour and a half of their day watching this documentary and maybe get some entertainment value out of it. But I think the negatives for the people involved that are being mentioned, because even though Peter Todd is who they're assuming are making the accusation, there were numerous other individuals that are all still alive that were also accused. So even though they came to the conclusion that they thought it was Peter Todd, every single other person that was mentioned in this documentary that's still alive has a risk associated with them, because it's like, well, what if it's them? You know what I'm saying? So what if some crazy lunatic does something that crazy lunatics do in our society today? It's not out of the realm of possibility to one of these individuals that was named in this podcast. And there's, in my opinion, there's definitely liability with this documentary for anything that happens to any of these individuals that they're throwing accusations at.
Yeah, like even like from the government just wanting to know more information and blah blah blah. Like, I can definitely see like people are going to want to contact him because, well, I wanted this, or I want to, like, even people that are maybe not have ill intent, they're just going to make that guy's life, these people's lives difficult, just because these people are going to gravitate to them because they think that they can whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know, like, and then their family and just everything else. Like you said, it's like, who cares who invented it at this point?
I got a good clip. It's a 34-second clip from the documentary that encompasses, I think, what I think about the importance of understanding who Satoshi is, or the non-importance of understanding who Satoshi is. So I'll play it real quick. I'll put it into the mic so that the viewers can hear it.
understood the game theory of it all. If Bitcoin was successful, they'd go after it. I mean, if all the nation states adopt it, there's an anonymous figure somewhere that controls the largest share of it. I don't think he would have created this gift for the world just to keep it as a threat over the future. He was more thinking for the good of humanity. Money is very broken. It's just house of cards built on top of more house of cards on more houses of cards.
So I mean that's basically encompasses what I think as well. I mean the fact that we're so caught up in who the person, and I think it's funny too that Samson kind of refers to it as being a guy, like could have been a woman. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know if it's,
and I don't
10
think,
people.
Honestly,
you know?
I don't know if there's any prominent women that have been accused. Again, full disclosure, I haven't watched the documentary yet. I basically just went to TLDRs on Twitter to see everybody else's take on it and the videos. I haven't sat down to watch the whole thing because I don't really, as a Bitcoiner, it's just another kind of like yawn for me and another just like eye roll of like, here we go again with this shit. We're spending our energy in the wrong places. But I do, like I said, I do see the value why people would want to watch it.
I like the idea that they make the documentary because I think it's important that more and more people maybe understand Bitcoin. And if watching a documentary on HBO helps them understand that, maybe they're willing to look at the way they do financing, whether it's Bitcoin or, like their documentary could have like value if that was the focus. What is Bitcoin as opposed to who is Bitcoin?
There are much better documentaries that have been privately funded about Bitcoin that take the angle that you just said, but this HBO documentary isn't doing that. It's just searching for an individual. It's not searching for truth, in my opinion. It's just searching for clicks. The best documentaries are the ones that are not trying to get you to think something. In my opinion, I think if I watch a documentary, I want it to be they're presenting all potential sides of a coin, and it's your job to decide which side you think is the correct side, and everybody's interpretation can be different. But when you're coming away with this is who we think Satoshi is, then many people that are just like novices of Bitcoin are just going to be like, oh, Peter Todd Satoshi, and oh, that Bitcoin is just, you know what I mean? Like they're not really being educated on what Bitcoin is, why it exists, and what it. I think like a video like that kind of like dips its toes in the water of it. But yes, there should be more of a mainstream platform like HBO that actually does present the case for why Bitcoin exists, and the system that we're engaged in being as corrupt as it is, and being the house of cards that Samson was saying, and why Bitcoin is an opt-out of that, and going more in depth into that, and allowing a viewer to say, okay, here's how our traditional finance system works. Here's how Bitcoin works. This is what Bitcoin is hoping to solve for that. And then just allowing you to walk away to say, do I think it could or couldn't, or do I think the system is messed up as, the documentary is, and it allows you as the viewer to walk away and make your own assumptions. I don't like documentaries that walk away with gearing you into a direction. I think those are poor, in my opinion. My favorite documentaries are the one that just presents all sides, and at the end is just like you make your own decision on what you think the truth is, right? Those are good documentaries, and this from all the things that I've seen doesn't appear to be one of those. I probably will eventually get around to watching it. I watch enough clips where I'm kind of curious to see some of the back and forths that some of the individuals were giving this interviewer just for shits and giggles, I guess. But overall, I don't think there's a lot of value with this documentary in what us Bitcoiners are trying to do. I don't think it's a net positive for the forward motion.
If the guy came out, or if the gal came out and said, me and Gary, we were up in the, we were in the basement one day and we invented Bitcoin, and we're alive, and here's our proof that we did it. They chose to come forward. Let's assume that was the case. Does does it accomplish anything? Like it almost does and it doesn't. It almost like it doesn't. I don't know if it changes anything.
If someone or some people came forward and claimed to be Satoshi and moved those Genesis block coins, in my opinion, that would probably be the beginning of the end for Bitcoin. In my opinion. Because for me, the biggest draw for me is the fact that nobody controls it. So if you have an entity that not only created the protocol, but also controls the largest wallet, which is 1/121th of the entire supply, and now they could potentially have a cult like, Satoshi has a cult like following without knowing who Satoshi is, right? But now you put a name,
right,
a face to the name, and the access to the coins. I think the value of Bitcoin for me personally drastically diminishes. And I think for a lot of other Bitcoiners, it would be the same, because the big draw to this whole thing is that we don't have that central entity. We don't have a Jerome Powell. We don't have a central bank. We don't have like people making decisions that affect everyone. The ideology is that there's nodes spread throughout the entire world. There's Bitcoiners spread throughout the entire world, and no one individual holds any more sway than anyone else. Even Michael Saylor, who's made this Bitcoin standard strategy for MicroStrategy, and he and his company own over 1% of the total supply. Even him, he has just as much control over the protocol that I do. And that's a huge draw, right? Because Nancy Pelosi and Paul Pelosi and all those Congress people that are able to make movements in the stock market before we ever hear anything, they hold way more power than I do when I invest my money in the traditional markets. They're 10 steps ahead of me. Right. So they hold way more power than I hold. Even if I had a higher net worth than them, they would still sway more power because they could do more than I could do, even with the monetary value. I would have to be in that system inside like they are to have the same sort of power. So that would be in my opinion, that would be a death knell to Bitcoin if the actual Satoshi was alive and said, I'm going to prove it, and moved coins out of that wallet. I think that would be like,
honestly, you mentioned the coins, like what's the percentage of coins that are?
There's 1 million coins in that wallet, and there's only 21 million that ever be made.
Right.
As of
so those coins, like, do you think that someone controls those coins, or are they just kind of lost in the system?
It's one of two things. Either the person that controlled them is dead, the creator.
Right.
My opinion, I've said this many times. I'll say it again. My belief of who created Bitcoin was Hal Finney. Hal Finney is the individual who received the first block. He received the first block of coins from whoever Satoshi was in 2009. I think it's Hal Finney. And Hal Finney died of ALS in 2015, I think it was.
Okay.
He died. Bitcoin was only a couple $100 at the time.
Right.
And his wife has received, there's she doesn't speak often, but she did the What is Bitcoin podcast, or What Bitcoin Did podcast with Peter McCormick like last year at some point. And she spoke about in 2014, 2015, when he was literally like at the end stages of the ALS, that the death threats that they were getting and the people that were coming to their house harassing them, because as Bitcoin was gaining popularity, and I mean, it went from literally pennies to, at the time he died, I think it was like $400 or $500 a coin. So that the percent gain that had gone, and even at that point in time, the million coins at $500 a coin is still an astronomical value of money. They were getting a lot of threats. You know what I'm saying? So, and that was early on in the hundreds of dollars. Imagine like where we're at now in the tens of thousands, and when we get past 100,000. But he passed away, and I think that he was Satoshi. Maybe he wasn't, but either the individual is gone or lost the keys. Because I just don't think, maybe I don't give the human race enough credit. Maybe I'm just too battered in my experiences of life to believe that there's any human on the planet that could sit on $60 billion and never do
and not do
anything
something with it. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they have to be a bad actor.
Right.
I'm saying the best person, I'm saying Mother Teresa would probably
would do something with
that and say, I want to help X, Y, and
Yeah,
Z.
you can't live off the grid when you that much.
So
like,
so I just
you
think
know.
it's one of two things. It's either the seed phrases were lost or the person is dead. I just don't think anyone is just like proud of themselves for like being the best player of hide and go seek.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just don't think that that's the thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I never thought of that.
So yeah, it's and again, I think they're dead because I think you may have heard again, like you're how are you alive knowing that you have access to you have potential access to $60 billion, but you can't access it without being like telling somebody about that.
Right.
And being like, holy shit. Can somebody help me here? Like, can one of you other really smart people that maybe could have created this but didn't like help me out with this? And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah,
I
mean, like the thing is, like, let's say it was me. Like, it's not. Please don't come and threaten my life. Like it's funny because like let's assume like it was a person and they got sick or they up and died. Like, did they? Like, is there was like I don't know. Like I feel like that's a great story right there. Like like a fictional story of what happened. And that his or her wife, girlfriend, there's a cat out there that inherited, the $60 billion and no one knows how to access it.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's so weird that there's this equity out there that it's just kind of locked.
Yeah, and it's crazy because as Bitcoin ascends in price, at some point in time, if Bitcoin does what we believe it'll do, right? Which it's far exceeded many people's. I've been in this since late 2013, early 2014, over 10 years. It's exceeded the expectations of probably 95% of the people that I've ever encountered.
Yeah, most people thought by now it'd be dead.
Yes.
And it was just,
so, if it continues on this trajectory, at some point in time, Satoshi, whoever that person is or was, will be the richest person to ever walk the planet. They're already in the top 20, 30, whatever. I don't know where 60 right. billion puts you. I think the top is like 200 maybe ish.
When would it jump to that value? At the halvening, as you call it? Is that when would be a moment? Would there be a moment where, like, the all wonderful, powerful Oz can pull the curtain down and appear? Like, would there be a moment in time if that person is out there and is just incredibly patient?
No, we've already passed that, in my opinion. You
don't think there's a moment where, this is the time for me to come out and do it?
No, I don't think so.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, I don't. Because you also have to remember too, like, for the reasons that I just stated, they would also have to know that by revealing themselves, they're literally costing themselves billions and or whatever astronomical number that you're talking about. Because the moment that the Satoshi's revealed, the price is going to drop. The moment the coins move, there's sleuths on the internet that watch the blockchain. So if they saw coins move out of that Genesis wallet, they would know first.
They would know right away.
The price would know second, and we would all know third when they're like, why did Bitcoin just go to 20K?
Right.
What just happened? Right. So they have to know as well. Like, it would be this like game that you're playing. Like, and how do you liquidate? The other thing too, the other problem is, like, how do you liquidate? Let's say you wanted $60 billion. Like, how do you liquidate it to get the 60 billion without significantly affecting how much of that profit you're going to take?
Yeah, you can't like sell it.
You're not getting it
just
like
in a second.
You can't just like, there's so many.
You can't walk into a bank and say, I want to cash in my.
No, but I mean, you could move it to an exchange,
right?
And then once they move,
is there an exchange that can handle that?
I mean, once any coins move once it goes from that wallet to an exchange,
right,
the price drops,
right,
like a fucking hammer, like it just drops. So there's so many like factors that are built into that whole philosophy of like, we need to find out who Satoshi is. Where I just think, like, for those of us that have been along for this ride for a long time, us Bitcoiners, it's like when I saw that, my initial reaction, I honestly, I thought when I first saw it on Twitter, I thought the trailer was kind of cool. I'm not like, just from a viewing.
As a video guy, I would say,
as that was
video
cool.
guy, like it made me want to watch the documentary. I'm going to watch it because I don't know enough about the culture that I want to learn about it. Like I don't have a horse in the race, so to speak, but I definitely want to watch the documentary because I do want, and I'm HBO tends to produce things at a high level of quality. But the trailer was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I know there's other documentaries out there, but I want to watch one that's going to be like, but again, now that I'd only read a little bit about it, and because obviously when I found out about it, the thing hadn't even been seen yet. And then I read that's probably a similarity. I read an article on CNN about him denying. He's like, no, it's not me. Like, he came out and denied it, and he talked a little bit about the threats and stuff. So definitely, yeah, it's definitely it looks like it's well done. It's just a question of, like, again, obviously you've stated pretty clearly that you don't like kind of the concept. It's the wrong type of documentary. It's not really what we need. It's almost like it's a gotcha kind of thing.
Yeah. For the reasons that you just said, like, well produced, caught your eye, like, that's what makes me so disappointed in why it couldn't have been a more fruitful documentary to actually dive into what Bitcoin is, what it does, and why it's needed, instead of playing this cat and mouse game of trying to figure out who Satoshi is. Because, like I said, when I saw the production of the trailer, I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. And then I seen the premise of it, I'm like, really? This is what we're going to do? This is what HBO is spending their time and energy trying to do, find out who Satoshi is? Why can't we have a well-produced, mainstream platformed documentary on giving people the opportunity to make their own decision on what Bitcoin is and what it represents, instead of like this narrative driven documentary on trying to figure out who this mystery person is and then accusing somebody of being it at the end. There's just no net positives that I see in this documentary for the community of Bitcoin.
It comes back to that concept when it comes right down to it, is that these corporations, there's six major media corporations. You have Netflix and you have Twitter and stuff out there on the side, but when you think of, like, your media is basically controlled by six companies. Comcast and the NBC group and Disney, and there's six major groups, and they're probably not heavily into this environment, so they don't really want to do a whole big thing about why crypto, Bitcoin, whatever is the next big thing, or the collapse of the economic system, because those companies will be adversely affected when Bitcoin shoots through the roof. Because when Bitcoin shoots through, like you've said, that means those companies just lost half their value. And, so that's Hurricane Milton to them. So they're unwilling to do legit documentaries on their platforms because it's not in their best interest to do so.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like an eye roll. Like I said, when I see these types of documentaries that are being produced for people to consume, and like you said, like you're in this because you produce this Bitcoin podcast, so you see and hear this on a weekly basis, but you're not in the community as immersed as like regular everyday Bitcoiners are. So this is your like introduction, not necessarily you particularly, because
you're right. I think
you're getting this, this exposure of our space and ecosystem through this like piece of shit ideology of like, let's find out who, because what do they get? Like, what do you get at the end of this? Like, you're not, unless Peter Todd says, oh, you got me. Yeah. Holy shit. I'm going to go move 1,000 coins out the Genesis to prove that you got me. You're like, what is the end game for this? Like, all it does is probably make things a little bit more annoying for Peter and for anybody else that was even mentioned in the documentary, because you're going to have people that are going to be like, no, it's not Peter. It's Adam Back. Oh no, it's not. It was Len, the guy that passed. There was a guy in there that also passed away, committed suicide. He was in his 30s, and he was one of the cypherpunks that they figured out could have been involved. And again, like, that tweet that I read by Predator was really good because I'm like, dude, there's always like literally 10 or 12 people that we keep circling back to, Nick Szabo, like the guys that they think that were Satoshi because they had like direct contact with Satoshi in emails and such in the beginning.
Right.
But it's like completely ignoring the fact that there's probably 10,000, if not 100,000 individuals on the whole planet Earth that have the brain capacity to figure this type of thing out that we just don't know about because they're not everyday names that are in our space, like Nick Szabo, Adam Back.
Yeah, there's
Hal
like
Finney.
Nobel Prize winners
Yeah,
and
of
economic
course.
guys that are probably capable of thinking down. And those types of people probably, I would assume that there's like guys that sit around, women that sit around that have these conversations about like, you know, think tank type things where there's an overlap of people where they're thinking of like, what's the next big thing and blah, blah, blah. Some of these people that I think are going to be covered in this documentary may have overlapped with that person. You know, and maybe it's someone we'll never know. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, it's like the Kennedy assassination. We're never going to know. There's not a file somewhere and even if there was, let's assume there's a Xerox from like 1962 where the guy wrote, I did it, and he signed his name and he was the one who killed Kennedy. Even if we found that tomorrow, and even if that document exists, it's never going to be proven. Everybody who probably was involved is all gone, but no one would believe it anyway. Like, well, it's a fake. Like, or they made him say it. No one. We're never going to know for sure. We'll never know for sure, unless because even if a guy came out tomorrow and said, "Well, I am Satoshi," like. There'd probably a lot of skeptics unless he could move stuff in the block and like from that piece, no one would believe him anyway.
So the white paper was released originally to on a cypherpunk newsletter, and there was a handful of people. I don't know the exact number. I don't want to say it was dozens or hundreds. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not the exact number. I don't know, but I know when the white paper was released, it was released in a cypherpunk newsletter. So all the email addresses in the cypherpunk newsletter of people that received that at one point in time were questioned as potentially being Satoshi, right?
Right.
So like there is a world where just somebody who knew all these cypherpunks but wasn't one of those people in that email address potentially just said, hey, I just figured out how to do this that numerous other people in this cypherpunk group were trying to figure out, and maybe potentially idolize some of those people, but was like young and up and coming and figured and wanted to share it with them. And it's somebody that we have no idea who that person is. But again, something tragic maybe happened to that person and they passed. Because again, I don't buy into the fact that whoever created Bitcoin is still alive. I just don't think there's a human being alive that could watch that block of coins ascend in value like it has and not think of both nefarious as well as like humankind changing ideas that they would have on both ends of the spectrum.
I think you're really probably right. I think realistically, whoever it was, like, was walking across the street, got hit by a car, and nobody ever knew. And it just
died of cancer, like something. Yeah, I mean,
but even like the dying of cancer thing's funny to me, not funny to me, but like weird to me, because if you're there dying of cancer, you're probably going to be like, all right, I'm dying of cancer. What do I do with this? I almost feel like it's an unexpected death. Like, I feel like if like the conspiracy person in me to say or he was murdered, like someone found out and murdered him, like that would be like, but I think his death was unexpected. Like, you know, I mean, we've talked about conspiracy theories, and part of it is like, nope, he just got hit by a car, or she just got hit by her, or there were people that did not want this to be a thing, so they killed him. Like, or her, like, it's weird to me, like, because I totally believe that both are possible. Like, there's so many conspiracy theories out there that are crazy until you actually read some of them. You're like, well, I could see this happening in this world now.
My like, number two, like Hal Finney's, who I thought for probably since I first started thinking about who it could have been, was who I thought Satoshi was. My number two of who potentially I think could have been Satoshi. Again, this is such a stupid conversation because it's again, right. But my number two would be Len Sassman. And Len Sassman would be my number two, not only because of the credentials he had as a cryptographer and all the things that he did and how smart he was, but shortly after Bitcoin was released, he killed himself. That's another plausible,
Yeah.
like, I just created something that could change the world and I don't know how to handle all this.
Yeah.
And like, I
Yeah,
mean,
no, that's
it's
what I mean.
just
Like
plausible. Like,
right.
you know what I mean? Like that either you're dying of a disease like ALS that just makes, like, he went from running races to like a wheelchair in a very short period of time. If you've ever seen anybody, die of that disease or progress from that disease, unfortunately I have. It's quick. So like that would make sense. Or, Len Sassman committing suicide, or somebody walking across the street and getting hit by a bus. Like, I don't think that it's just someone that's maybe you're right, like dying slowly of like some sort of disease and would have time to get their affairs in order.
Yeah.
And have the time to like think and contemplate.
Because there was no action. If it, like, part of it had been siphoned off at some point, then it would believe like, oh, the guy put some of it away, but he was afraid of the consequences if he liquidated the whole thing, versus it's just sitting there and it's inaccessible.
Yeah.
Which is weird that there's this weird unaccessible piece of this Bitcoin out there that's like probably never going to get touched.
Yeah. And it's kind of been, the other thing too is like it's priced in when you think about the scarcity level, because when you talk about there being only 21 million Bitcoin, there's really only 20.
Right.
Because if you count the 21, then you're making the assumption that the million would move, which would be catastrophic.
Because it can't really hurt the value unless somehow it was, there, like you said, like the oh my God, that's who it is. That other than that, it almost like it's just there. It doesn't help her just sitting there on an island. It doesn't really help or hurt the overall value.
It's just there existing. Yes.
Yeah.
I said last week on the podcast, in 2026, we'll get to the 20 millionth Bitcoin mined in the history of Bitcoin. And it will take another 114 years to mine the last million. That's how, like, outside of the fact of a million coins representing a high percentage of the total 21 million, that's how impactful 1 million coins are, that the last million are going to take 114 years. Whereas by 2026, it'll have taken 17 years to mine 20 million. So 20 million get mined in 17, and then the last million gets mined in 114 years.
Right.
So that's why
it's designed that way
Yes.
to prevent it from just.
It's designed that way to always go up.
Right.
Always go up in value and be more scarce.
Which we do where we print too much money.
Yep.
Because if it was just constantly mining, well, it would just, again, that's the system we're in now, is that we'll just make more. We'll just print more because it's not really based on anything, which is controlling the whatever it is. And then that's why all this stuff has value, whether it's art, gold, a signed copy of, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Like these are things, there's only, you can't make more. Like these things are finite, and that's why they have value. Like that's why, like I'm a sci-fi guy, and people are like, oh, we should go out and find an asteroid that's full of gold, and like, well, yeah, but like, sure, there's an asteroid that's maybe 100% gold, but if we brought it here, all it would do is screw up the market, because then gold wouldn't be as valuable because we just doubled the supply. Like there's you know what I mean? Like things are valuable if they're scarce, and right, supply and demand, supposedly.
Yeah.
So that it almost defeats the purpose of, unless it's something that the metal you need because you use it for things, manufacturing, you use it in cell phones, platinum, things like that you need because it's more that it's not just something we lock in a vault. It's something we use in manufacturing. Yes, those are the things we should be looking for, like to increase wealth.
I want to read a tweet real quick because I had a thought, and this tweet ironically is going to go into the next thought of what you kind of just said. How much is enough for you? At what money net worth would striving to make more money stop becoming a main driver from you? And Lawrence Lepard, who I follow, he also follows me on X, responded, "This is the problem with fiat. No one can answer because the tool being used to measure is broken. We are all just the greyhound chasing the rabbit that we'll never catch. It's all put on." So again, the thought that I was having, and then I remember that I saved that tweet to talk about today when you were speaking. The thought I was having is that this Bitcoin experiment is not going to be completely understood and respected in my generation, and potentially not even the generation right behind me. It's going to probably be about 40 years from now, give or take a decade or two, where people get it, and then are looking back and being like, how did they not see it?
Right.
Because this generation doesn't. There's a Bitcoin community, and we represent such a small fraction of the overall population. And there's guys like me that are just like, this is the future. You are fucking up the easiest layup in the history of layups. Like the ball's in your hand and the hoop's in front of you. You just have to roll it in, and you're not doing it, which is why I get so frustrated talking to Troy and talking to others that are trying to trade their way out of the fiat nightmare. Right. And I'm just like, buy Bitcoin, accumulate Bitcoin, and just put it away. And it's not necessarily potentially going to be just for you. It's going to be for the future people that you care about, because when the time comes that you're going to be like, it's like a 1952 Mickey Mantle. Let's use that as an example. 1952 Mickey Mantle rookie card, right? In 1960, nobody gave a shit about that card. 1970, nobody gave a shit about that card. Even into the 80s, it was starting to be like, oh, maybe that's like a $5,000-$10,000 card. There's some value because Mickey Mantle was like, right now, a PSA 9 copy of that card, $5 million card. The PSA 10, only 3 exist of that card. You're talking $35 million for that card. You couldn't see it way back there.
Right.
You started to see it gradually as like, oh, maybe there's some value here, some value, until you really turn around and said, holy shit, this is super scarce. This card has value. How did they not see it? Why were they putting it on their bikes and riding around the street with $1 million on their bike and they didn't realize that?
Right.
That's how Bitcoin's going to be 40 years from now. People are going to look at it this generation like, how did you not see that?
But
you were engaged in this system here,
right,
and you had this option here and you missed it.
But I've learned enough to know that somebody's cleaning out great grandpa's basement and they find 25 Mickey Mantle cards that the guy just happened to have because he loved Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
And there happened to be in a Ziploc bag, a baggie from, 1965. That changes that market. Like that, they're no longer worth the 35 million because all of a sudden we found a bunch. Or you get to a point where like, who's buying that? Like, that's the problem with these things. People can list the price of their house for whatever they want, but you have to find someone that actually wants to buy it for that amount. Like, I can list something on Facebook Marketplace for $500, but that doesn't mean someone's going to, like, I can buy at Home Depot for $250.
Price is heavily driven by demand. So you made a good point with the Mickey Mantle example. If somebody found 1,000 PSA 10 Mickey Mantles tomorrow, the PSA Mickey Mantle 10 is not a $35 million card anymore. You're completely right. One of the strongest qualities of Bitcoin is they're not making anymore.
They're
actually making
That's
less.
what I was kind of saying.
Yeah. So there's that effect. And you also, it's like the thing that people can't wrap their head around is like, okay, this coin is worth $60,000 a coin. At some point, there's just going to be a point where like you can't buy it anymore because it's too expensive, and you can't wrap their head around when people say that Bitcoin's going to be worth $1 million a coin at some point in time. And it's like you're getting so wrapped up in what he was saying. You're the greyhound chasing the rabbit. You're never going to chase the rabbit because you're thinking of things in the fiat world of like $1 million of like fiat and what that represents.
Right.
When you're looking at Bitcoin, you're pricing it in the current broken system. So when you start pricing things in value, it's like, okay, you think of $1 million and what $1 million will buy today. You have to stop thinking about the $1 million and start thinking about what Bitcoin can give you in terms of lifestyle change. What kind of things can it bring to your life that $1 can't bring to you now?
Right.
And it's a hard concept for people to like divorce themselves from and see. And even as myself, and you know this from the other world that I'm in, I understand this to so good that I have my Bitcoin world and then I have my fiat world, because I don't think Bitcoin is necessarily going to take over the fiat world in my lifetime.
Right.
Because if I sit here and believe that, then I'm going to hurt myself today because I'm going to take away from my ability to operate in the world that's still predominantly dominated by fiat.
Right.
So my goal is stack as much as I can over here and not even count it as part of anything,
Right.
because I'm going to save that for the future generations.
Yeah, I mean,
So I need to earn money today to pay my bills today, because they number one, I don't want to give them something that's going to be worth way more in the future,
Right.
but I still got to pay my mortgage. I still got to pay utilities, and I still got to eat food.
And that's the problem, that I think a lot of people don't know how to spend correctly. And I'm not talking about these kids with their avocado toast. I don't mean that shit. That shit just pisses me off, because I don't want to go down that. The people that say that stuff are the same people that are making in the same job. They're making 20 times, 30 times more than their counterparts did 20 years ago because of the way the system's corrupt.
Yeah.
But but I'm saying that, but you do have to think about, okay, like my wife's like, well, I want to go on 5 vacations in 2025. I'm like, okay, we can, but that means we're going to have to pull money out of our retirement, which is fine if you want to do that, but understand, like, we can't afford to go on 5 vacations. We have the cash to go on 5 vacations,
but you have to sacrifice
but then I'm not going to
somewhere
have that cash in 25 years when I need it to pay medical bills or my car payment, or when my pension doesn't go as far as it used to. So, I mean, yes, like, people tend to get money in hand, younger people in particular, because they aren't, and I don't even mean like an 18-year-old. I mean, people in their 30s don't necessarily understand how long they want to work and how much money they need to retire at the level they want to retire at. I don't think most people are actually sitting down with any type of financial planner and figuring out what they want their life to look at when they're 70.
Yeah, 100%. Most people today are just flying by the seat of their pants, and most people are assuming that this, and again, from my day job, I see this all the time. People are assuming that the employers that they work for have their best interests in mind when it comes to retirement planning, and they're like, oh, I'm putting 10% of my paycheck into my whatever retirement plan X that they have with their job, and their job isn't a retirement planner. They're not retirement planners. So nobody knows if the money that they're putting is going to do what it needs to do for them to actually retire when they want to retire. And then they don't have these conversations until it's far too late. And then and again, the system is broken and it is problematic, but you can only blame the system for so long until you start to say, okay, I recognize this is a problem. What am I going to do about the problem to try to give myself a chance?
Right.
Because if you're blaming the system when you're 60 years old, it's like, yeah, you probably came across, especially with social media, you probably came across a couple of videos at some point or somebody saying something that could have been like, hey, maybe I should look into that, especially since I'd like to retire.
If you're old enough
someday.
to remember 2008, you act like that's not going to happen again.
Of course.
At some point, or even like the property crashes of earlier before that.
Yeah.
Like, there are definitely those things that you have to, and I think that's why even the fiat system understands the importance of an ETF. Right.
Yeah.
Because they recognize that, okay, we want to be around too. So maybe we need to start using that as
you're teeing things up. Great. My next tweet is an ETF tweet.
Wow.
You are teeing things up.
Look at me.
You are teeing things up.
It's like we planned this shit.
So you just mentioned ETFs. Listen to this. You're going to like this because you were just going down down that street. Almost half of Schwab's respondents to their survey said they plan to invest in crypto ETFs more than bonds, international alts. Pretty stunning. And it's not a huge sample size, but I mean, it's decent enough. 1,000 people Schwab sent a survey out to, and this was the results. 19% said that they're going to invest in alternative ETFs. 27% said they were going to invest in international equity ETFs. 40% real estate asset ETFs. 44% bonds, fixed income, 45% cryptocurrency, only to be beaten by U.S. equity by 55%. So the allocation of people investing across these spectrums was 55 U.S. equity, 45 cryptocurrency, 44 bonds, fixed income, 40 real assets, 27 international equity, 18% alternatives. Imagine this same survey 5 years ago. And it's just the change in that short period of time. Yep. I believe at some point in time, cryptocurrencies will be the top one that people are investing in. it's just that
It's
the
a nice
mindset.
happy medium for people that maybe don't want to buy it, but they're willing to invest in it, so to speak.
Yeah,
If they feel like their portfolio has that piece, then they feel like they're part of a world that maybe they don't want to manage themselves, but they're willing to put something into other people to manage it, which is kind of a weird way of looking at it. But for someone, that might be their level of comfort because they don't want to be responsible for the key and all that other crap.
yeah,
Like they just figure, I'll just do it this way.
it was an inevitability for us to get penetration into the mainstream mindset to let them know that we're here. It was going to be necessary to have Wall Street involved in the capacity that it is. I think the jury's still out if it's a net positive or net negative long term per se, but to get the ball rolling for people to be like, hey, I want some exposure to crypto, but I don't really understand this whole self custody thing or buying on exchanges, but I can buy it in my Schwab account or my, TD Ameritrade account and just buy the CTF and have it. That's kind of cool. But then I think what my hope is eventually what ends up happening is that they own the CTF and now they start to take ownership of the fact that they're exposed to Bitcoin and crypto. And then they start to learn more. And then they stumble across the fact that they see people like me or others say that you don't technically own it unless you self-custody it and owning the keys. And they say, well, what is that? And they start learning. And then they make the decision, is that something I'm comfortable doing? Do I really want to do that? And then if they do, then they become true Bitcoiners where they self-custody it and, are self-sovereign and experiencing all of the true natured effects of what Bitcoin was originally meant to give us.
Cool.
Yeah. Last thing real quick. I didn't have time to talk about it at the beginning. Earlier this morning, they released inflation numbers. I don't know if you saw that. Came in a little bit hotter than expected. Anthony Pompliano tweeted this. Here we go. Inflation just came in hotter than expected. The Federal Reserve is in a lose-lose situation. Human-led monetary policy requires them to use backwards-looking data to make decisions today about events in the future. Impossible job, and it just got a little tougher. So here we go again. Inflation coming up a little bit higher. Oh, and one more thing I'll end on too that he also tweeted, Anthony Pompliano, which is, I think it's eye raising in my opinion. We just hit a new all-time high for the number of Americans working more than one job. This problem is only going to get worse as automation drives down real wages for certain jobs. Have to keep your eye on this trend. And there's a chart here. It goes back from 95 to the present, and it's in thousands of persons. And it looks like it was down around 6,900 or 7,000 thousands of persons. So what's that, 7.7 million ish, and we're trending up towards past 8.8 million people working more than one job, which is an all-time high. That's telling, I think, for the economy, that people are strapped. People are living paycheck to paycheck and feel like that they have to get that other source of income to get by, which is not a good thing. All right. That kind of wraps up this week's episode of the Defion Productions podcast. If this is your first time checking us out, it helps out our channel to subscribe. We have a lot of content. We have over 300 videos between long form videos, medium form videos, short content that you can look at. We've been here since 2022, right around the FTX collapse. We've been doing this through the bear market all the way through this starting of the bull. Sharing this video, liking this video, subscribing to our content really helps things out. As always, don't trust, verify. See you next week.